Okay, today we'll be making the bestest pot roast ever using simple ingredients that you have lying around your house. We're using chuck roast, and when you purchase chuck roast, you want to get one that's as lean as possible, so you don't want too much fat all over the place and gristles and thick caps of fat, because what we're going to be doing is that once we finish slow cooking the pot roast, we'll be using the broth for gravy, so we don't want all that grease floating around the gravy. So what I did was that I trimmed off all the white cap fat and as much as the internal fat as possible. Usually pot roast, you're going to have a thick veins of white fat in it. So we want to trim off as much of the white fat as possible. And this is going to apply to short ribs, because you can use the same recipe for doing pot roast and short ribs. With short ribs, naturally you want to get one that's got a lot of meat on the bone. And this is where you have to get to know your butcher or your meat counter person very well. Because what they usually do is they sell you a pack of short ribs and they have two pieces that has a nice plump meat on it, and the rest are bones with slivers of meat. And back in the days, the pot roast and then the short ribs used to be the cheapest cut of meats out there. Now it's one of the most expensive when you trim away the bone and the waste. So best way is when you're buying a chuck roast like this. This is 2.8 pound chuck roast that I purchased. You could get this in chuck roast variety, 7 bone roast, or arm roast. They're basically all going to work fine if you can use this as a pot roast. And by the time I got through trimming off all the white fat and all that, I think we're down about 2¼ pounds. Now initially when you start this off, if you want, you could use your Foodi over here and set it at the sear setting, and then you could brown this chuck roast in maybe 2 tablespoons of oil and 1 clove of garlic, and you could sear it on both sides if you want to caramelize it. But since we're slow cooking this for such a long time, the top section is going to brown up anyway, so appearance wise, I'm not too concerned too much about it. Now when you're using the Foodi, you have 2 options on the slow cooker. You got high and then you got low. Now both low and high cooks at the same temperature. So it's going to bring up the water to about simmering point, which is about 180 to 190 degrees. So slow cooking does not mean that it's going to cook it at a lower temperature the whole duration. It just means that it's going to slowly bring up the temperature of the water to the simmering point, versus high, which is going to take up the temperature of the water to the simmering point pretty quickly. So on high, it's probably within a couple of hours it's going to be up at the simmering point. At a slow cook, it's probably going to take 3 or 4 hours to get up to that point. So that's the difference between slow and high. We're going to keep it at the high setting. So here's the ingredients we'll be using for our pot roast. We're using 4 bouillon cubes, beef. We're using 1 thick carrot that's cut in big chunks, probably about 1 inch, and 2 celery hearts, and cut about 1 inch or more. We'll be using 2 pinches of rosemary leaves, marjoram, and thyme. And we're going to salt and pepper to taste. So this is all the ingredients that we're using for our pot roast. Here you can see I've added about 2½ cups of water. I've added the bouillon cubes, and here you can see I put in 2 pinches of the seasonings, and then with salt and pepper to taste. You don't have to use too much salt because the bouillon cubes have quite a bit of salt in it. So just salt and pepper to taste. And this is what it looks like right now. While I was speaking to you, I have the machine on, and you can see that the beef broth has already dissolved. And you can see we have, now if you got a larger, thicker roast, you're probably going to want to add maybe another ½ cup of water. So at this point in time, all we're simply going to do is put our roast into the water. We're going to add the vegetables that we just chopped up by sticking in the water next to it. The vegetables are going to add some more liquid to the cook. So you can see as we add the vegetables and water to it, the water level is going to be just under the top of the meat. And then when you're slow cooking this top portion meat is going to start to turn brown because of long cook. We drop down the lid, make sure it's over here. We got on slow cook, and we're going to set the time, let's say about 9½ hours. That's so that if I'm not around, it's going to keep cooking. So set for 9½ hours, and once it reaches 9½ hours, it's going to automatically go into the warm mode. Now naturally, something like this will probably be done between about right around 7 hours. It should be fork tender at that point. So about 7½ hours, 8 hours, it's going to be done. So I just keep it at 9½ hours just in case I'm not around, and then it keeps cooking so that it's going to be cooked. When you're using chuck roast or arm roast or anything like that, you cannot overcook it. So don't worry too much about time. Just worry about not cooking it long enough so that it's not shreddable or fork tender. So we'll get back to you once this is done, and we'll show you how to finish it off by making gravy with the leftover broth inside the pot itself. Okay, it's been about 8.5 hours. So the pot roast here, you can see it's all brown. Like it says, we didn't have to sear it because it's going to brown up anyway. Pretty fork tender. So the pot roast is done. What I do is we're going to want to add some noodles at this point. So probably 2 handfuls of noodles. And this is the egg noodles. That's the wide version. And the noodles will soak up some of the juice, so it's going to be pretty flavorful, the noodles. And if you have to, at this point in time, since the pot roast's been in here for a while, you could add some more water. I can see we're down to about 1.5 cups of water, so I'll probably add another cup of water to it. And then once the noodles get done, I'll pull the pot roast and the vegetables out, and then we'll make gravy with the leftover broth. So I'll get back to you once that's done. Noodles take about 6.5 minutes. Celery all gone. Looks good. Well, here's what it looks like after we remove the noodles. Noodles are infused with all the broth from the beef, so the noodles are nice and tasty. This is the vegetables, it's all tender. You can see the pot roast, it's really fork tender, so it's almost shreddable. It's got a nice dark coating on it already. So it's all ready to be served. Now this is using a slow cooker for 8.5 hours or so. You could also pressure cook this. Pressure cooker on the Foodi, it'll probably take you about 1.5 hours to get it to this tenderness. But I tell you from experience that slow cooking produces a far better product than pressure cooking on a pot roast. Slow cook it, to me it comes out to be more tender and a lot more flavorful because you had 8.5 hours of having all these spicing and broth infused into the meat. But anyway, this is what it looks like after we pulled out all the ingredients. We're down to about 1.5 cups, so we're going to bring this up to about 3 cups or as much gravy as you want to make it. We have this setting, I'll kick it up to 3, so we want to get this broth boiling again. Now, at this point in time, what you want to do is you want to taste it to see if you got to add more salt and pepper to it. So I tasted it, and we're probably going to add a little more pepper to it. And maybe just a dash of salt. We don't need too much. We got some stuff on the side here we just scrape down. Add to our flavor. Okay, now broth has come up to a boil, so you can make your gravy any way you want it. I use flour and water. You can use cornstarch and water, I guess, but whatever you're used to doing. So we'll slowly add it until we get the right consistency of the gravy that we want. Okay, we can thicken up yet. And we're going to add a little soy sauce here for coloring and for a little bit of flavor. Uh-oh, we got the flour. Yeah, if you get lumps in gravy, don't worry about it. You can strain it out. You got to get the right temperature of water mixture, and it's just not quite perfect. Okay, now you can see what looks like plated up. And we added some of our gravy on top of the rice, noodles. And then you can see how tender and juicy the meat is. It just shreds apart, and that's the way I like pot roast. I like it nice so that you can shred it just like that. I know it's going to taste good because we got all that juice and meat and seasoning just soaked into the meat. Very good. So I hope you found this video informative. Please click the like button. When you have a chance, please subscribe. And thank you for watching.